The night of February 21st, 2021 will forever be etched into the memories of those who witnessed it. A man, desperate and broken, sat in front of a camera, staring into it like he had just lost everything. On Facebook Live, he confessed to a crime so shocking, so that it would send shockwaves through the lives of his victim and her family.
On my soul, bro. On my soul, dude. Like, I'm hurt. I'm hurt like I'm hurt like I can't even believe I just did, and I don't even know what just pushed me to snap like that, yo. I don't even know what just pushed me to snap like that.
The man speaking was Larry, and the woman he'd just 11 times, her grandmother and her uncle as well, was the mother of his child, Lasagna Aji, a woman who had loved him, had tried to build a life with him, and had suffered in silence for far too long. But why? Why did he do it? Why did a man who claimed to love the mother of his child turn on her so violently? This is the story of Lasagna Aji, a woman who had faced years of emotional and physical yet still believed at some point things would get better. She wanted to protect her son. She wanted to build a future. But what she didn't know was that the moment she made a desperate attempt to escape, her life would change forever. But before we begin, I just want to take a moment to thank you, my incredible viewers and subscribers. Your likes, shares, and thoughtful comments don't just support this channel, they help keep these stories alive. If you're new here, welcome. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and become part of this growing community that believes every story deserves to be told, and no victim should ever be forgotten. Now let's get into it. Lasagna Aji's story begins in the tough streets of Chicago, a city where crime is never far behind. The Windy City, home to more than 3 million people, has a notorious reputation for violence, and it's not just statistics. In 2020, Chicago faced over 770 homicides, a relentless surge in violence that seemed to swallow everyone in its path. But for Lasagna, the danger wasn't just in the streets, it was inside her own home. She was a fighter. Raised without a mother, abandoned too soon, Lasagna grew up having to fight for herself. She learned quickly that if she was going to survive, she'd have to do it alone. But she wasn't about to let her story end there. Lasagna was determined to make a better life for herself, no matter what it took. She had graduated from Proviso East High School and was seen as a woman full of potential and drive. Working hard at the United States Postal Service, she was doing what most people would call a steady job. But Lasagna wasn't like most people. She didn't just want to get by. She was working a side business too, selling cosmetics online, hustling to give herself her dream life. But then came Larry. When they met, everything seemed perfect. Love, hope, a little baby boy born in 2017. They were a family. Or at least, Lasagna thought so. But behind the scenes, Larry was something darker, and Lasagna, in all her courage, wouldn't realize it until it was too late. Larry was everything Lasagna didn't know she was getting into. He was controlling, jealous, possessive. What started as small, innocent disagreements over everyday things, money, future plans, work, soon grew into explosions of rage. It wasn't just an argument anymore. It was manipulation, isolation, emotional destruction. Larry's jealousy didn't just eat at him, it ate at her. He tried to isolate her from her friends, from her family, from everything that made her Lasagna. And then the violence began. At first it was a slap here, a shove there, small enough that she could brush it off, telling herself it was just a bad day. But the bruises started to show. Her once confident smile faded, replaced by the reality of abuse. The man who promised to love her tore her down, and she couldn't understand it. Why was he doing this? Why had she ended up in this nightmare? She couldn't leave, because every time she tried, Larry's threats became more real. And then came the isolation. So Lasonia was done. She had made the decision, the final decision, that she couldn't live this way anymore. The fear, the pain, the constant torment, it had been far too much for far too long. She had to leave. But it wasn't going to be easy. Larry wouldn't make it easy. In the dead of night, Lasonia quietly packed her things, carefully, methodically, as if she were assembling a plan in the silence of her own mind. She couldn't risk him hearing her. She couldn't risk him knowing. Not yet. She had to get away to find a sliver of freedom, even if it meant doing it alone. And so, she moved into a new apartment, determined to start fresh, a space of her own, away from him, away from the nightmare he had forced on her. But this wasn't a fairy tale, and Larry's reach was long. She thought she had outsmarted him. She thought she had won. But Larry always found a way. No matter what she did, no matter how hard she tried, he was there. Lasonia took legal action, filing for a restraining order. She did everything by the book, thinking that the law would protect her, that the system would help her escape his grip. But Larry didn't care about orders. He didn't care about consequences. One night, as Lasonia sat in her new apartment, alone and hoping for peace, the doorbell rang. Her heart skipped a beat. She hesitated, looking through the peephole. It was Larry. Her breath caught in her throat. He had found her. Panic set in as she grabbed her phone, calling the police. But by the time they arrived, he was gone, vanished into the night. Just like that, he slipped through the cracks. Again. But his presence lingered. It haunted her every corner, every inch of her new home. The quiet calm she had hoped for was shattered in a heartbeat. The next day, Larry broke in, shattering everything in his path. Her belongings were strewn about, a violent reminder that no matter how hard she tried, Larry's wrath was ever present. He destroyed everything she had worked for, everything she had tried to build. He ripped through her space, her safe haven, with the fury of a man who felt entitled to everything she was and everything she had. This was no longer just about him and her. It was about his need for control, his obsession with owning her. Lasonia had nowhere to go. There was no safe place, no hiding, not even in the one apartment she had tried to make her own. So she had no choice but to return to him, and least for the safety of her son and her family that were also under threat. Days turned into weeks, and the abuse intensified, both physical and emotional. Black eyes, bruised arms, broken windows. He humiliated her in public. His violent outbursts knew no bounds, and with each incident, Lasonia felt her spirit breaking bit by bit. The weight of his disrespect crushed her, leaving scars deeper than the ones on her body. But despite it all, Lasonia didn't give up. She had to keep fighting. She had to keep moving forward. She saved up enough money for a car, her first step toward independence, her ticket to freedom. The moment she bought that car, it felt like a victory. It was small, but it was hers, and it gave her hope. Hope, however, is a fragile thing when you're living in the shadow of someone like Larry. He wasn't about to let her go, not without a fight. Larry's reaction was swift, fury unleashed in the most brutal way possible. He found the car, drove it into a garage, and wrecked it. The moment Lasonia saw the destruction, her heart sank. The car, her one symbol of independence, had been reduced to nothing. The abuse escalated, and the physical toll it took on Lasonia was unbearable. Black eyes, bruised arms. It wasn't just private anymore. People at work were noticing. Her supervisor, seeing something wasn't right, took it seriously. The tension in Lasonia's body was too much to hide. She couldn't focus. She started skipping work, a slip she couldn't afford. But then something incredible happened. Her supervisor, who had become suspicious, arranged for co-workers to walk with Lasonia after her shifts to make sure she wasn't alone. And the postal service, seeing her struggles, even offered her a chance to transfer to go somewhere safe. For the first time in a long time, Lasonia had hope. Hope that she could start over, away from Larry's unrelenting control. She saved money again. She even bought a new car, a hidden symbol of freedom. But once again, Larry's reach was long and his anger unpredictable. One day, he found the photos of the car on her phone. The rage he felt was instantaneous, blinding. In a split second, he destroyed what little she had left. The car, her symbol of independence, was ruined beyond recognition. He drove it into a garage, crushing it into a mess of metal and glass. The crushing sound of metal against concrete echoed in Lasonia's mind for days after. She was broken, not just in body, but in spirit. Her resolve had been shattered. But the worst wasn't over. Larry's next move, taking their son, was a blow Lasonia could never have predicted. He took the one thing that mattered most to her and used him as leverage to make sure she had no way out. She couldn't run. She couldn't breathe. She had no choice but to stay with him, hoping, praying she could find some way to protect her family. She went to the police again, begging for help, but the response was the same. This is a custody issue. They couldn't intervene. Lasonia didn't stop. She fought. She filed another restraining order, but Larry didn't care about the law. He told her bluntly, "You won't see your son again until you come back to me." There was no escape. She tried to keep going, to get back to work, to build the future she dreamt of, but it was all slipping through her fingers. One last attempt. Lasonia bought another car, thinking maybe this time, with everything hidden, she could make it work. But this was Larry. He was always one step ahead. Also, when she went to check out a new apartment, a place she thought was her chance to make a clean break, she was horrified to discover that Larry had set her up. The ad was fake. It was a trap. He was there, waiting for her, and this time, the desperation in his eyes was worse than ever. He begged her to come back. But when begging didn't work, he threatened her. Again. She couldn't risk it anymore. She had to go back to him, at least for now. She had to see her son again. But she couldn't stay. She couldn't go on living like this. She wouldn't. It was a constant battle, emotionally, physically, mentally. Larry's manipulation was only becoming more intense, more calculated. He wouldn't stop. And then came Valentine's Day. What should have been a day of love, a moment of peace, became the final straw. Lasonia got into her car, determined to escape, just for a few hours, just to find some space for herself. But as she pulled away, she heard something that sent shivers down her spine. A sound, a faint sound, like a slight rustle, but it was enough to make her stop the car. The horror she felt when she opened the trunk, he was there. Larry had hidden himself in the trunk, waiting for her, lurking in the darkness. He had left a Valentine's gift in the back seat, a twisted gesture of affection. He wasn't done yet. He wasn't finished breaking her. Just when things seemed to be looking up, her job took an unexpected turn. One day, her supervisor called her into the office. They informed her she was being let go. Lasonia was devastated. Her supervisor explained that a customer had complained about her, claiming she had stolen mail and left it in the trash. Shockingly, the trash included documents that proved her identity, including her son's birth certificate. Lasonia knew the accusation wasn't true, but she couldn't prove her innocence. She later realized it was Larry who had set her up to lose her job, just another way for him to keep her under his control. This was the breaking point. Lasonia couldn't stay at home anymore. She couldn't stay in the haunted apartment. She couldn't even stay at her friends' houses. So she hopped between hotels, constantly looking over her shoulder, terrified. Her family was now part of the danger zone. She knew Larry was becoming more unhinged, more desperate to get control back. But the worst part was, no one around her would help. They thought she would go back to him, just like she had every other time. But this time, it was different. Something was about to give, something was going to break, and Larry wasn't going to be the one pulling the strings anymore. He would face consequences. The moment everything changed, the moment that would leave the entire neighborhood in shock. It was February 21st, 2021, when Lasagna's world flipped upside down once more. After everything she had endured, after all the physical and emotional scars, she thought she was finally free. But Larry had other plans. It started like any other day. Lasagna had just returned home to the 7,800 block of South Mewson in Chicago, tired from a long day at work. She parked her car, exhausted, and sat for a moment to gather her thoughts, unaware that her life was about to spiral into chaos once again. Seconds later, the familiar sound of a car pulling up next to hers broke her brief moment of peace. Larry. He had found her again. He was the man she once trusted, the father of her son, but now he was nothing more than a nightmare in human form. He pulled up beside her, and with an unsettling calmness, began speaking through her car window, trying to convince her to come back to him. But she refused, standing her ground, telling him to leave. What happened next was too quick to fully grasp at first, like an avalanche of emotions all tumbling at once. Her uncle, standing nearby, must have sensed the tension. The threat was too real. Before she could even process what was happening, Larry got out of his car. He didn't hesitate for a moment. Without warning, he pulled out a gun and aimed it directly at her uncle. Bang! Her uncle dropped to the ground, the weight of the shot echoing in the air. Lasagna's heart pounded in her chest. In the blink of an eye, the nightmare she had been running from for months had come crashing into her reality. In panic, Lasagna bolted for the safety of her house, but Larry wasn't done. He turned the gun on her, his anger fueling every shot. Bang, bang, bang. Lasagna collapsed to the ground, helpless as the bullets struck her body. Her grandmother, who had been nearby, wasn't spared either. Larry's violence knew no boundaries. He turned toward the car, where their young son was sitting, completely unaware of the horror unfolding around him, and opened fire. The bullets sprayed the vehicle. The sound of gunshots rang in the air like a symphony of chaos. Miraculously, Lasagna's son survived. But the trauma of that moment would be something he would carry with him forever. He managed to crawl out of the car, reaching his mother in a desperate attempt to help. He tried to soothe her, saying, "Come on, Mama, come on," as though that could reverse the horror unfolding. He would forever remember that moment, the moment his father, the man he trusted, tried to take his mother's life. The neighbors, hearing the chaos, rushed to help, calling for emergency services. Larry, realizing what he had done, fled the scene. But instead of hiding in fear, as most would expect, Larry did something that stunned everyone. He went live on Facebook. "I love that woman dearly, bro. I love her dearly, bro," Larry said into the camera, his words dripping with regret and anger. "Ain't no motherfucker going to see me no more. I ain't running. I'm not running from these people no more. They come get me. That's all I'm gonna say." Larry's rant was chilling. His words were full of self-pity, his anger laced with confusion and pain. "I just up," he said. "I don't even know what pushed me to snap like that. But it's over now. Ain't no coming back from this." He rambled about how people didn't understand him, how much pressure he was under. He admitted he didn't know what had pushed him to this point, but in his mind, there was no turning back. The police were coming for him, and he knew it. He was ready to face the consequences, but it seemed like he didn't fully grasp the magnitude of what he had done. Back at the scene, Lasagna and her family were rushed to the hospital in critical condition. She had been shot 11 times, her body torn apart by the bullets. But, miraculously, none of the shots hit any vital organs. Most of her injuries were to the lower part of her body. Her pelvis and right leg were severely damaged. Her liver had also been impacted by the attack. Despite the traumatic injuries, Lasagna survived. Her grandmother and uncle also survived, though they were seriously injured. Her uncle had taken 8 bullets, but against all odds, he pulled through. The physical scars would heal, but the emotional scars, the fear, the horror, would linger forever. As Lasagna fought for her life in the hospital, the police quickly identified Larry as the prime suspect. Witnesses came forward, and it became clear who was responsible for the attack. Larry, the father of Lasagna's son, had committed this horrific act. When Lasagna was finally able to speak, she recounted the terrifying events. She described the shock of surviving, the disbelief that someone she had once loved could do this to her. She believed that Larry had targeted her family in an attempt to silence any potential witnesses to his crime. His violence wasn't just about hurting her, it was an attempt to erase everyone who could tell the story of what he had done. Though physically alive, Lasagna's soul felt shattered. The trauma she had experienced would haunt her for the rest of her life. Her son, too young to fully comprehend, had witnessed his father's attempt on his mother's life. And yet, even though Larry had fled, even though Lasagna had survived, the fear wasn't over. Larry was still on the run, and she lived in constant fear that he would come back to finish what he had started. Weeks passed. The police had been searching for Larry, but he had gone underground. Then, finally, law enforcement tracked him down to an apartment on Mary Jane Street in Mansoura, Louisiana. Larry, seemingly resigned to his fate, surrendered without incident. He was brought back to Chicago, where he faced charges for his actions: 3 counts of attempted murder and 3 counts of aggravated battery. This was the turning point. Larry, the man who had once been a part of her life, was finally going to face the consequences of his actions. Lasagna, still recovering in the hospital, knew that with Larry's capture, she could begin to heal. The nightmare wasn't over, but there was a flicker of hope on the horizon. Desperate to rebuild her life, Lasagna set up a GoFundMe page, asking for help. In her plea, she expressed how thankful she was to have survived. She shared the unimaginable struggles of leaving an abusive relationship, something many people think is simple, but for her, it nearly cost her life. Her GoFundMe raised over $11,000 to help her start over, but it was more than just money. It was a lifeline, a symbol of the support that people all over the world were offering her as she took her first steps toward healing. But Lasagna's story also raised crucial questions about the justice system. She had filed multiple police reports against Larry, but nothing serious had been done until after the shooting. Could the tragedy have been avoided if her complaints had been treated with the urgency they deserved? How many other cases like hers are being overlooked? Lasagna's message is clear: abuse is never okay. Leaving such relationships may seem impossible, but it is possible. She survived, but she knows not everyone is as lucky as she was. If you or someone you know is in an abusive situation, her story is a reminder to take action before it's too late. This case was a brutal reminder of how domestic violence can go out of control when warning signs are ignored. It's a message we can't afford to overlook. Lastly, Lasagna's decision to seek help, to fight for a better future for herself and her son, is a testament to her strength. However, her story is not unique. Millions of people live in fear, facing similar struggles, and many never escape their circumstances. It's time we take a deeper look at how we, as a society, can ensure that support systems are in place for those who need them most. If you found Lasagna's story eye-opening, We need your support in raising awareness about domestic violence and the need for change. Please consider liking this video, subscribing to our channel for more real-life stories that matter, and sharing this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Your comments are important. How do you think society can do more to help victims of domestic abuse? Do you believe more could have been done to prevent what happened to Lasagna? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. Your voice could be the catalyst for change. Together, we can start a conversation that might just save someone's life.